Fear has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. One moment, everything seems fine, and the next, anxiety grips your heart, making you question everything. How many times have you felt trapped by worry, unsure of what tomorrow holds? You pray, but the fear doesn't leave. You trust, but doubts still whisper in the back of your mind. What if there was a way to break free from this cycle? Here's something most people don't realize: fear isn't just an emotion, it's a spiritual battle. And the key to winning it isn't found in more control, more plans, or more distractions. It's found in something ancient yet powerful. Psalm 56. This isn't just another Bible verse, it's a declaration of trust, strength, and divine protection. It's the exact prayer that can shift your heart from fear to faith. David, the writer of this psalm, knew what it was like to be overwhelmed by danger. He was hunted, threatened, and surrounded by enemies. But instead of letting fear consume him, he made a choice. He put his trust in God, and that changed everything. What if you could do the same? What if, instead of drowning in worry, you found peace that no circumstance could shake? This is exactly what we're going to explore today. Psalm 56 holds the key to overcoming fear, no matter what you're facing. Whether it's anxiety about the future, struggles in your relationships, or the weight of uncertainty pressing on your shoulders, this prayer has the power to transform your mindset and strengthen your spirit. So, if you've ever felt afraid, stuck, or desperate for peace, stay with me. Because by the end of this, you'll not only understand Psalm 56 in a deeper way, but you'll also have a powerful prayer that will help you overcome fear once and for all. Fear can be paralyzing. It creeps in like a shadow, whispering worst-case scenarios and making the strongest person feel powerless. But what if fear isn't meant to control you? What if it's just a signal, a sign that you need to lean on something greater than yourself? The Bible is filled with moments where fear was conquered not by human strength, but by divine trust. And that's exactly what Psalm 56 teaches. It's not just poetry, it's a battle plan, a roadmap to turn anxiety into unwavering faith. David, the psalmist, knew what it was like to be afraid. He wasn't sitting in comfort when he wrote these words. He was on the run, hunted by enemies who wanted to destroy him. Yet instead of surrendering to despair, he made a bold decision to trust in God completely. Imagine that. Instead of letting fear dictate his actions, he chose faith. And that's the secret hidden in this psalm: a choice. Fear may knock at your door, but it doesn't have to take up residence in your heart. Think about a moment when fear consumed you. Maybe it was a financial crisis, an unexpected medical diagnosis, or the weight of uncertainty about the future. In those moments, fear feels real because it is. But so is God's power. Psalm 56 isn't just a comforting verse, it's a weapon against fear. Every time anxiety whispers, "You're alone," this psalm declares, "God is with you." Every time worry says, "There's no way out," these words remind you, God makes a way. The question is, will you believe it? The secret to overcoming fear isn't avoiding it, it's learning to face it with faith. Think of a child in the dark. When they hold a parent's hand, the darkness doesn't change, but their confidence does. That's what prayer does for us. It shifts our focus from the size of our fears to the greatness of God. Fear shrinks in the presence of trust. And trust isn't built overnight, it's developed through constant reminders. Like the powerful words of Psalm 56. David wrote this psalm in the middle of his struggles, not after they were over. That means you don't have to wait for fear to disappear before you trust God. You can start now, in the middle of the storm, when your heart is racing and the outcome is unclear. That's what makes this kind of trust so powerful. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It transforms them. Psalm 56 isn't just about surviving fear, it's about rising above it. So how do you apply this in real life? Start with one habit. When fear rises, pray instead of overthinking. Instead of playing out the worst-case scenario, recite Psalm 56:3. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Say it out loud. Write it on a sticky note. Make it your go-to response. Over time, fear will lose its grip because your first reaction won't be panic, it'll be prayer. And that's when transformation happens. The beauty of this psalm is that it doesn't promise a life without fear, it promises victory over it. And that's the key. It's not about eliminating fear, but learning how to master it through faith. As you walk through challenges, remember, fear may be loud, but it's not final. The next step? Understanding how God's presence and protection make that victory possible. Life has a way of throwing unexpected storms our way. One moment, everything seems fine, and the next, you're hit with financial struggles, health scares, or relationships falling apart. In those dark moments, fear tries to convince you that you're alone. But here's the truth: God never abandons His people. No matter how overwhelming the situation feels, there is a peace available that defies logic, a peace that comes from trusting in Him. Psalm 56 is a reminder that even in chaos, God is still in control. Think about it. Why do some people seem unshaken by hardship while others crumble under pressure? It's not that their problems are smaller. It's that their trust is greater. When David was pursued by enemies, he didn't let fear dictate his actions. Instead, he turned to prayer. He poured out his worries before God, and in return, he received supernatural peace. That same peace is available to anyone who chooses to trust rather than panic. It's a decision one that can transform anxiety into confidence. Consider this. When you're in a dark room, do you fight the darkness? No, you simply turn on the light. That's how faith works. Fear loses power when you replace it with trust. The Bible repeatedly tells us, "Do not be afraid," not because problems don't exist, but because God's presence is greater than any struggle. David understood this deeply, and that's why he could say in Psalm 56:4, "In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust, and am not afraid." Those words weren't just poetic, they were his survival strategy. Imagine carrying that kind of confidence in your daily life. Instead of reacting to bad news with panic, what if your first instinct was to pray? Instead of staying up all night worrying, what if you meditated on God's promises? The world teaches us to rely on our own strength, but that only leads to exhaustion. Psalm 56 offers a different path on, where peace comes not from controlling everything, but from surrendering to the one who does. Let's get practical. Try this. Every time fear sneaks in, say it before you do anything else. Speak out loud. God, I choose to trust you right now. Write down a verse from Psalm 56 and keep it where you can see it on your phone, mirror, or dashboard. These small actions may seem simple, but they rewire your mind. The more you replace fear with faith, the more natural it becomes. That's how trust grows one decision at a time. And here's the best part. You don't have to feel strong to access this peace. Strength isn't a prerequisite for trusting God, it's a result of it. The more you lean on Him, the stronger you become. This is the power of faith. It shifts the burden from your shoulders to His. So instead of letting fear steal your peace, choose to trust that God is already working things out for your good. The question is, will you let go and allow Him to? Because here's the reality: God's presence is not just an idea. It's a living, active force in your life. And once you understand that, everything changes. But what does it really mean to be under God's divine protection? Let's explore that next. Have you ever felt completely unprotected, like the world was against you and there was nowhere safe to turn? The truth is, life is full of battles. Some are external, like financial struggles or difficult relationships. Others are internal battles of the mind, anxiety, and fear. But here's the good news. God's protection is real, and it surrounds you even when you don't see it. Psalm 56 is a powerful reminder that no matter how fierce the enemy may seem, you are never defenseless. David knew this firsthand. When he wrote Psalm 56, he wasn't sitting in a palace, he was fleeing for his life. His enemies were many. His strength was little, but he had something far greater: God's presence. Instead of giving in to fear, he made a bold declaration. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Psalm 56:3. That's the key. Divine protection isn't about never facing problems. It's about knowing that God fights for you. The enemy may try to intimidate you, but when you trust in the Lord, you stand under a shield that no attack can break. Think of a child walking through a dangerous street but holding the hand of a strong, loving father. The danger is still there, but the fear isn't, because the child knows they are protected. That's how faith works. The moment you trust God, you step into His divine protection, where no weapon formed against you can prosper. But here's the challenge. Do you really believe in God's protection? Or do you let fear control your thoughts? When problems arise, do you first panic or pray? Psalm 56 teaches us that trusting in God's protection is a choice, a daily decision, to believe that no matter what happens, He is still in control. What does this protection look like in daily life? It means that even when you feel surrounded by difficulties, God is already making a way out. It means that the things meant to harm you will ultimately be used for your good. It means that every battle you face is already accounted for, and victory is already written in God's plan. So the next time fear whispers, "You're alone in this," respond with Psalm 56:9. "Then my enemies will turn back when I call for help. By this I will know that God is for me." Let those words sink in. God is for you. His angels surround you. His hand is upon you. His promises cover you. You are never alone. And once you truly grasp this, you will walk differently. You will move with the confidence that no force in this world can shake you. And if God's protection is this powerful, imagine what happens when you start walking in His purpose. Let's dive into that next. It's easy to trust in God when everything is going well. But what about when you feel attacked from every side? When people betray you? When circumstances turn against you? When fear tries to take over, what do you do then? Psalm 56 was written in one of David's most desperate moments. He was being hunted, falsely accused, and surrounded by enemies. Yet, instead of giving in to despair, he chose to trust in God's care. That choice changed everything. David's enemies were relentless. They watched his every move, waiting for him to fail. Maybe you felt that way too, like the world is against you, like no one understands what you're going through. But here's what makes Psalm 56 so powerful. David never let fear define his actions. He didn't waste time fighting battles in his own strength. Instead, he cried out to God, knowing that divine help was always greater than human opposition. And that's a lesson for us today. Think about this. When life gets hard, do you focus more on the problem or on the one who can solve it? The enemy wants you to believe that you're alone in your struggles, but the Bible makes it clear God sees every tear, hears every prayer, and holds every broken piece of your heart. David knew this, which is why he declared in Psalm 56:8, "You have kept count of my tossings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book?" Imagine that God literally collects your tears. Every fear, every sleepless night, every silent cry, He sees it all. And He does not forget. That's not just poetic language. It's a promise. You are not forgotten. You are not ignored. You are held in the hands of the Almighty. So what's the practical step here? When you feel attacked by fear, by people, by circumstances, don't react with panic. Pray. Speak Psalm 56 out loud. Remind yourself, God is for me. I will not be afraid. Write it down. Carry it with you. Let it sink into your soul until fear has no choice but to flee. Because here's the truth. The attacks may come, but they won't define you. The struggles may be real, but they won't last forever. God's care is constant, unshaken, and unstoppable. The question is, will you trust Him enough to rest in that care? And if God values your tears this much, imagine how much He values your prayers. Let's go deeper into that next. Fear is one of the greatest weapons the enemy uses against us. It paralyzes, confuses, and makes us doubt God's promises. But here's the truth. Fear is a liar. It tells you that you're alone, that things will never change, that your prayers go unheard. Psalm 56 dismantles these lies by reminding us of one simple but powerful fact: God hears every cry, and He never forgets a single tear. David understood this deeply. He wasn't writing Psalm 56 from a place of comfort, but from a place of desperation. He had real enemies pursuing him, yet he refused to let fear dictate his actions. Instead, he turned his anxiety into trust. He knew that God is not distant, nor indifferent to suffering. And here's where it gets personal: He sees you too. Every struggle, every worry, every silent prayer, you are not invisible to God. Let's get practical. How do you trust God with your fears? First, you acknowledge them. Denying fear doesn't make it disappear. But when you bring it before God, something shifts. Pray Psalm 56 out loud. Write down your worries and surrender them one by one. Replace every fearful thought with a declaration of trust. Because fear thrives in silence, but it loses power when faced with truth. Think about it. When a child wakes up from a nightmare, what brings them comfort? Not logic, not self-talk. They need to hear the voice of a loving parent saying, "I'm here, you're safe." That's exactly what God does for us through His Word. Every verse of Psalm 56 is like a whisper from heaven saying, I see you, I'm fighting for you, you are not alone. But the real question is, will you choose to believe it? Will you release your grip on fear and take hold of faith instead? Trust isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. A choice to believe that even when things look uncertain, God is working behind the scenes. A choice to stand on His promises, even when emotions try to pull you in another direction. And if God never forgets your tears, imagine what happens when you start praying with faith. That's exactly what we're going to explore next. Prayer isn't just words, it's power. It's the bridge between fear and faith, between anxiety and peace. But here's what most people forget. Prayer isn't about convincing God to act. It's about reminding your soul who He already is. When David prayed in Psalm 56, he wasn't informing God of his problems. He was declaring his trust, realigning his heart with divine truth. And that's exactly what we need to do today. So, how do you pray based on Psalm 56? You start by being honest. No need for perfect words, just raw, real faith. Try something like this. Father, I come before you just as I am, afraid, uncertain, but choosing to trust. I know you see every tear, every worry, every battle I face. Your word says that when I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. So today, I choose faith over fear. I declare that you are my refuge, my protector, my safe place. Let your peace fill my heart and remind me that you are always near. In Jesus' name, amen. This kind of prayer isn't just a routine, it's spiritual warfare. When you declare God's promises out loud, you're pushing back against every lie of the enemy. You're silencing fear and making room for faith to rise. And the more you do this, the more your heart aligns with heaven. Pray Psalm 56 daily. Write it down. Keep it close. Let it be your anchor in every storm. But here's the thing. Prayer isn't just about asking, it's about believing. It's about stepping into the confidence that God is already at work, even when you don't see it yet. Imagine waking up every day with a deep assurance that no matter what happens, you're covered by divine protection. That's what happens when prayer becomes your first response instead of your last resort. Now, think about the battles you're facing: financial struggles, relationship conflicts, inner doubts. What if, instead of worrying, you started declaring? What if, instead of overthinking, you started praying? Because when you make prayer your weapon, fear doesn't stand a chance. And speaking of real-life struggles, let's talk about the difficulties we face. Because God's power isn't just for the big battles, it's for the everyday challenges too. Life isn't easy. No one escapes trials, whether it's anxiety that keeps you up at night, financial stress that weighs on your shoulders, or relationships that feel like they're falling apart. But here's the truth most people miss. God never promised a life without struggles. He promised His presence through them. Psalm 56 doesn't deny hardship. It acknowledges it while declaring God as the ultimate refuge. Think about David. He wasn't writing from a palace, surrounded by comfort. He was on the run, hunted by enemies. He knew what fear felt like. He understood the weight of uncertainty, but instead of giving in, he chose to trust. His situation didn't change instantly, but his perspective did. And that made all the difference. What if you could do the same? Let's get practical. What does trusting God as your refuge look like in everyday life? It means that when anxiety knocks, you answer with prayer. When fear whispers lies, you respond with faith. When problems feel overwhelming, you remind yourself that God is bigger. It's a mindset shift, a decision to anchor yourself in truth instead of emotion. Because feelings change, but God's promises don't. Take financial struggles, for example. Maybe bills are piling up and stress is creeping in. What if, instead of panicking, you declared Psalm 56:3? When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. It won't magically erase the problem, but it will realign your heart with faith instead of fear. And that alone changes how you face challenges. This is the kind of faith that moves mountains, not because it ignores problems, but because it refuses to be shaken by them. Trusting God doesn't mean the storm stops immediately. It means you stop fearing the storm. And once you grasp that, something shifts in your spirit. You stop reacting and start resting. Not in your own strength, but in His. And when you discover this level of trust, it's not something you keep to yourself. It's something you share because there are people around you right now who need to hear this truth too. When you experience the power of trusting God, something amazing happens. You can't keep it to yourself. It's like finding an anchor in the middle of a storm and seeing others struggle without one. You don't just hold on, you reach out and help. That's why the message of Psalm 56 isn't just for you, it's for everyone who needs hope, strength, and a reminder that they are not alone. Think about this. How many people in your life are silently battling anxiety, fear, and doubt? You might not see their struggles, but they're there. Your faith isn't just personal, it's powerful. It can be the light someone else desperately needs. Sometimes, all it takes is a simple word, a shared Bible verse, or even a prayer on their behalf to plant a seed of hope. And here's the truth, you don't need to be a preacher to make an impact. You just need to be willing. Share your own journey. Talk about how you've seen God move in your life. Maybe it was a moment when you thought everything was falling apart, but God showed up in ways you never expected. People relate to real experiences. When you open up, you give others permission to do the same. Social media, messages, even casual conversation, every interaction is an opportunity to remind someone that God is their refuge. Instead of just scrolling past negativity online, what if you posted something that inspired faith? Instead of letting a friend drown in worry, what if you sent them a message reminding them that they are not alone? Small acts create ripple effects, and you never know who needs exactly what you have to share. So, here's the challenge. Who in your life needs to hear this message today? Maybe it's a family member, a coworker, or even a stranger. God placed you where you are for a reason. What if your next conversation is the one that shifts someone's faith? Because when we share His truth, we multiply hope, and that's something the world desperately needs. So now you know fear doesn't have to control you. The words of Psalm 56 are more than just verses. They're a divine weapon against anxiety, doubt, and worry. But here's the real question. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you let fear keep whispering lies, or will you stand firm in God's promises? Think about your life right now. Where do you need God's strength the most? Maybe it's in your finances, your relationships, or your health. Whatever it is, the key is trusting Him completely. And that's not always easy. But imagine the peace of knowing that, no matter what happens, you are held in the hands of the Almighty. That's the kind of faith that Psalm 56 calls us to live. Now, here's something important. Faith grows when it's shared. Who in your life needs to hear this message? Who is struggling with fear just like you were? Take a moment to send this video to them. You never know how God might use you to bring peace into someone's life. And if you want to keep learning, growing, and strengthening your faith, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We're building a community of believers who refuse to live in fear, and you belong here. Don't let this message stop with you. Let's spread the power of faith together. Are you ready to take the next step? Drop a comment below and share your biggest takeaway from Psalm 56. Let's start a conversation that brings hope to others.